A comparison of active versus passive recovery between sprinting bouts during a repeat sprint protocol, blood lactate accumulation and the impact on sprint times. My name is Tony Grant and I'm currently a second year student studying for a Bachelor of Exercise and Sports Science at Central Queensland University in Rockhampton. An increasing awareness of the benefits of adopting a healthy lifestyle and incorporating increased physical work rate has led to a growing demand for maximum effectiveness in minimum time. Team sports provide a social aspect to fitness, but then present their own unique sets of demands. Short bursts of high-intensity exertion are often necessary for the duration of the manoeuvre, both in organised sport and general training regimes. This highlights the necessity for efficient functioning of the human body at optimal levels during physical activity, in particular a continued skeletal muscle energy supply for the duration of the movement. The constant demand for brief explosive actions, such as hitting up the ball in rugby league, running to intercept a soccer ball, or sprinting to break clear in netball, place stress on the body, as it is expected to provide the required energy for each action. These are often intermittent in nature, permitting replenishment of energy reserves during the recovery period. The duration of these high-intensity actions may lead to the accumulation of lactate in the bloodstream. To maintain homeostasis and support energy requirements, the cycle of removing blood lactate must be expedient to assist with the continuing supply of glucose to the working muscle, ensuring a successful completion of the activity. The crossover findings from one discipline to another are not truly accurate, and studies devoted to repeat sprints are limited. As was stated by Ferrier, his study was based on cycling, and the Bouchette also concluded that the inclusion of active recovery contributed to higher lactate accumulation and oxygen uptake when tested over short sprint distances, with their testing protocol paralleling this subject. To date, though, studies have focused on athletes in specialised sporting arenas, the results of which may not transfer well to an athlete of average fitness or for the physical fitness industry workers endeavouring to provide effective training programs. A study based on participants of moderate fitness levels mirroring energy requirements in game situations would be extremely beneficial to a health-conscious public and fitness industry professionals. Ramifications of past studies imply a trade-off exists between continued performance levels and blood lactate clearance based on the method of recovery employed. Due to a paucity of specialised studies in the area of high-intensity repeat sprints, duration of less than 4 seconds, performed by persons of moderate fitness ability, this project investigates the effects of both active and passive recovery on blood lactate concentrations and the times for repeat sprints. It is hypothesized that the active recovery utilized in this protocol will contribute to more elevated blood lactate concentration levels after the sprints than the passive recovery. It is also hypothesized that the blood lactate concentrations will not cause a decrease in performance times for the repeat sprints following active recovery protocol. A group of 12 mixed-gender exercise physiology students participated in this randomized crossover design testing protocol. The testing procedure involved each participant completing a repeat sprint test under both active and recovery positions. Basic anthropometric measures were gained on all participants. Informed consent and a readiness PAR-Q test were all completed prior to participation in this step. The basic procedure involved first gaining the anthropometric measures, the signed consent form and doing the fitness tests. Then they were all familiarised with the testing protocol. Prior to actually commencing the testing, a heart rate monitor was fitted to each participant. Also, a sample of capillary blood was extracted from the finger, so this was analysed. Timing lights had been erected in the gym from the start position and at 5-metre intervals to the finish line 20 metres away. Testing began with a heart rate and blood lactate levels tested prior to the warm-up. A standardized warm-up was performed by each participant immediately prior to their testing. Heart rate and blood lactate were once again checked post-warm-up. Participants were then allocated either passive or active. They performed one recovery protocol in one training session and the alternate one on a separate training session. Once this was chosen, they performed their repeat sprints, 10 repeat sprints, at which time heart rate was recorded at the start of each sprint. RPE was also recorded before and after each sprint. Once they had finished, immediately heart rate and blood lactate were checked again, as they were 3 minutes and 5 minutes post-protocol. The outcome measures for this involve the blood lactate concentration and sprint times. Both these data sets were averaged over the total activities and splits. Also recorded were heart rate, rate of perceived exertion, and then fatigue percentage was also calculated from the data. Statistical analysis was applied on this data using Microsoft Excel 2010. Dependent t-tests were the tests used with an alpha level of 0.05 applied. All results are shown as a means plus or minus standard deviation. This table here shows that the blood take levels per recovery type. As you can see, the main difference when I first looked at the total average, there was a statistical difference present there. I then went back and analysed each stage of the protocol and discovered that there also existed a statistical difference immediately post sprint protocol. When it came to the sprint times, they were quite consistent, and as you see, overall, if you look at the actual mean for each of the one, there's only 0.03 of a second different over the whole between the active and the passive recovery. The findings of this study serve to provide a base of information that is specific to the impact of recovery types during repeat sprint activities of less than 4 seconds duration, or 2.88 seconds, as our testing showed. The ability to maintain these performance levels while blood lactate levels are elevated is significant. Specific data relevant to sprints is lacking, but as these stimulate many real-life sporting and training situations, a need for knowledge exists. Past studies have shown a connection between blood lactate levels and the duration and intensity of the activity. While relevant to specific sports training, the interest here is more on continued performance levels for people of average fitness and those who train them. One study that was conducted that resembles this protocol was based on the repeat sprinting ability of basketball players. Now that game involves high intensity bursts interspersed with constant motion recovery. Their findings proposed that passive recovery contributed to slower sprint times. Similarly, in competitive sports such as judo, both the aerobic and anaerobic lactic systems contribute to the ability to perform repeatedly over a short period of time. It has been suggested that the accumulation of lactate may serve to decrease muscle function and subsequent exercise performance. In contrast, Spira discovered active recovery served to achieve a greater total work and cycling sprint test. Contradictory as this information is, it only serves to highlight the need for explicit studies relevant to the impact of blood lactate accumulation on performance times based on recovery type. The duration of the recovery appears tantamount in the final impact of blood lactate clearance. It has been suggested that the levels of lactate produced over such brief time frames may be oxidized by the moderately active skeletal muscle. Their studies were based on a 15-second maximal cycling sprints followed by a 3-minute recovery period, ample time for the oxidation process and also for ATP itself to be replenished by 90-95%. Shorter time intervals will inhibit these processes, but a more practical scenario for modern sports like touch football, netball, and rugby, where you don't really get to stand around for 3 minutes before having to complete another action. With controlled game times, the impact of recovery on time to exhaustion is not a major consideration, but the ability to perform at an optimal level for a greater percentage of time would be of assistance if player numbers were limited. We all know how everyone says they're turning up for the game, and then you barely have enough for a run on side. Real life often interferes with healthy leisure activities, leaving increased physical demands on those poor team members who turn up every week. While other physiological factors may contribute to blood lactate clearance, including the elevated heart rate and blood pressure, these factors would need to be examined individually to determine their impact. The actual time durations for sport-specific manoeuvres need to be replicated to add validity to future research projects. Existing studies concerning the efficacy of recovery types on blood lactate clearance and performance times lack the practical application for most modern sports practiced by moderately trained athletes. This repeat sprint protocol mirrors modern sport requirements, and results determine that optimization of performance may be achieved through the application of active in-game recovery processes with no resultant lack of performance times. The popularity of training modalities, including high-intensity interval training or HIIT training, are testament to the success of utilizing active recovery. The contribution of active recovery to consistent performance levels for the duration of the session is significant. Active recovery leads to a maximum gain in minimum time, with no notable decrease in performance when the intervals are kept short and the intensity remains high. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Are there any questions?